First thing I'd always look at is your technique. So you're starting with, are you using fresh coffee? Are you grinding it fresh? Are you doting and tamping consistently every time? Is your milk always fresh, or are you reheating? Are you overheating? Overheated milk loses a lot of its sweetness, and they're all things that can have massive impacts in the cup. The quality and the freshness of the beans are critical basically. As soon as it's roasted, it should be treated like a fresh product. You want to use it within 1 to 4 weeks of the roast date. Beyond that, it loses a lot of the inherent flavours in the cup and a lot of the real liveliness that should come out of your espresso, and you'll end up with very generic, flat flavours. Best way to check it is to look at the roast on date on the bag, talk to your roaster, understand the way they roast, the way they pack, so you know when is best to use that coffee. So with freshness and storage, you really need to store beans away from heat, away from light, away from moisture, and away from air. As soon as you open a bag, you've exposed it to the elements and it will degrade very quickly. So the best thing to do if you've opened a kilo and you're not going to use the whole thing within a couple of hours, is seal the bag and maybe sticky tape or rubber band to keep it closed and put it in an airtight container. That way at least the air is away from it for as long as possible. And grinding fresh, of course. Once you've opened your beans, you put them in the hopper, don't grind them into powder and leave them sitting that way because they degrade very fast again. Another very important factor is the cleanliness of your machine. A lot of people look at the facade and go, yes, my machine's clean, but for me it's about the insides. You open up the group handles, remove the baskets and have a look at all of that. That should typically be metallic, silver, or a polished yellowy bronze. Beyond that, if you're seeing brown, if you're seeing black, you will usually be looking at a dirty group handle with old oils that are going stale and are often putting bitter flavours into your cup. Then at the group head itself, your shower screen and the diffuser heads above it and all that piping system needs to be cleaned with chemical. I recommend daily because again, coffee oils move through there, they're under high heat, they go rancid, and again they cause flavour issues with the water before it even starts to heat the coffee. Machine stability is a relatively new factor that people have realised, and it comes down to, is your machine capable of keeping the appropriate pressure when it's extracting coffee? Is it capable of keeping the right temperature when it's extracting your coffee? And those two things can seriously impact your espresso quality. If your machine temperature is fluctuating, some coffees are best served at a particular temperature, and if you don't know what temperature your machine is running at, you'll never really know what's ending up in the cup. So absolutely critical if you can get a machine that can keep that kind of stability. A grinder affects the quality of your espresso because it is responsible for obviously taking the bean and making it into a powder. And the way it does that, many different grinders have different blades, different size blades, and that can impact what the powder comes out like. If people aren't replacing their blades regularly, you'll get blunt blades, and it's like trying to use a blunt knife to cut into something. It's much harder, it typically creates a lot more friction, and with coffee that creates more heat. And you really don't want to be doing that to the powder before you've started the brewing process in your machine. So with water brew temperature, this links to the machine stability. Different coffees of different roast profiles, of different origins, they all have different optimum temperatures, or potentially they could have different optimum temperatures to be brewed at. It's like a fine tea. If you brew it too hot, you'll often scald it. Coffee is exactly the same. So if you're brewing too hot or too cool, you're often not bringing out the best flavours in your espresso. So it's important to know what temperature is running through your machine and what temperature is best suited to your coffee. Truth is, I don't know. It depends on what's in the hopper. I give a guide, and that's always approximately 25 to 30 mils of coffee in about 25 to 30 seconds. It's a good guideline, it will get you in the right place. But the best way to know is to experiment with your coffee. Try extracting it slower or faster, extract slightly more mils or less, and taste it. And decide what you think works best. Decide what you think your customers are going to like most. Because every coffee is different, every coffee is unique, so one extraction rate doesn't necessarily fit all of them. There's a lot of tendency towards the double ristretto extraction. It uses twice as much coffee, but it does extract a bit quicker than a normal espresso would. So a normal espresso is about that 30 mils in 30 seconds. A double ristretto is using twice as much coffee and extracting it all into the one cup in about 15 to 20 seconds. They're still both 30 mils, but because you're using more coffee with your double ristretto, you're getting a much more intense flavour profile. They're just different, plain and simple, and not all coffees are best suited to an espresso or to a double ristretto. Again, experiment, try it, see what works best for your coffee, and use that. The roast profile of your coffee is also very important because depending on how light or dark it is, that can influence whether you want to be using a hotter temperature or a cooler temperature, and also whether you want to extract faster or slower. Now I'm only talking a couple of seconds faster or slower, but that can definitely impact the quality in the cup. And your roast profile, talk to your roaster, see what they think, see what flavours you should be getting, and modify your technique